let's call to order the September 17th. Oh, thank you.
I feel much better now.
September 17th meeting, Board of Directors meeting for the TTSA. Please silence your phones if anybody has a phone.
Oh,
That would be very appreciative. And at this point, let's take a roll call.
Director Clement,
I'm here.
Director Fox,
yes.
Director Wilkins,
Present.
Director Hansford. Yes. And Director Force.
Here. And I guess at this point, we should stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And at this point, do we have any public comments for anything not listed on the agenda? Do we have any online or written?
No.
Okay, thank you. And with that, let's go ahead and move forward to review and adopt the agenda. Do any directors wish to adjust or move any items on the consent or regular agenda? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second,
Motion by Director Wilkins, second by Director Cox. And do we need a roll call for that or all in favor? All in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Aye. Motion approved. And I believe Vicky, you are up with pretty impressive award.
Yes, good morning, President Wilson and directors, Vicki Lefrano, Human Resources Administrator. And yes, we have a pretty significant work anniversary this month. And that would be Bill Pindar from the laboratory with 25 years of service. Bill was unable to attend today, but we would still like to acknowledge and congratulate him. So great job, Bill.
I think 25 years speaks a lot about the people and the agency and culture. So thank him for us, and hopefully he'll be at one of the next meetings. Vicki, I do have a question for you real quick.
Sure.
One of the things when I first came on board was lost time to injury.
Okay.
Do we know, is that still in the thousands as far as days since we've had one?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay.
That is still correct.
Yeah, and for the newer board members, I don't know if you know this or not, but I believe a year ago it was, I don't know, 3,500 or 5,000 or some unbelievable number. It was literally years, and I bring it up now because that's the type of stuff that just continues to pay dividends, and it really speaks to the culture of where we are and the fact that people take safety very carefully. So thank you, Vicki.
Welcome.
And we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda and the approval of the board minutes for August 20th, 2025.
Move to approve.
Second.
Actually approving both.
Okay, yes. And the ratification of the general fund payments. I'm sorry. We want to amend the motion.
What's your motion, Dale, to approve?
Just the minutes, just the minutes.
Of this.
Well, they're both together.
Okay. I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Director Cox, second by Director Wilkins, sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. This one's a little confusing to me, so please be patient. The appointment of the agency board president and vice president.
I can present this. No problem.
Yes,
So effectively, according to the Agency Act, the board has a responsibility to name the president and vice president on a 4-year rotating basis, 2-year rotating basis. And we are at the end of that cycle. Currently, it's odd numbered years is when it gets determined. So we before the board is an opportunity to nominate and elect a board president and vice president.
So just a comment, so there was a long period of time, I don't know, 30 years, Dale, if you're longer, where,
We rotated.
well, where we did, like, this was before I was on the board, but where the president, vice president was the same person for a few decades back when Oz was the board president, but we changed probably changed that tradition maybe 8 years ago, where we started rotating it.
Yeah,
And I think it's a good thing to rotate it. Yeah, you've been in the president role just for a few months now, along with Bert, because you've basically filled out the rest of Blake's term. So, yeah, I think if you're willing to be president again, that'd be great. If Bert's willing to be vice president again, that would be great. And a couple of years from now,
so moved.
yeah. You made a motion for
You got it.
Scott for president, Bert for vice president. So yeah, I'll second that.
Okay.
Got through that, didn't we?
Very, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I think now the one that's even more confusing to me is the finance committee.
Yeah, so we released the capital governance document that Liz crafted to help us kind of formalize some of the policies and procedures of the finance committee, which was very helpful. We wrote it into that policy to appoint a member, 2 members from the board on the same rotating basis that we do president, vice president appointment. This is all, this is not the law. The other one was the law. This one is our own internal document. So we are at the same point. We need to identify a chair and a vice chair for finance committee for the next 2 years.
Who's, is it you and Bert on the finance committee right
Yes,
now?
yeah.
You're kind of getting a loaded plate here, Scott, but would you be willing to continue serving on the finance committee?
Well, my thoughts are to serve until January 1st. So
That's only a couple of months. And then what? And then what?
and then we've had discussions, or I've had discussions with Catherine. She would like the.
Okay, what about you, Bert?
I'm here, man. We're good.
Okay,
You're willing to do it, so to make sure.
I'm willing to get.
Are you sure? I don't know.
all right, so we got through that hurdle.
Very good. And I don't think we
So
need to-
moved.
Okay,
I think we do need to address who would be the committee chair and vice chair. Because someone needs to kind of coordinate the meeting and start, and stop and all that stuff.
I would recommend that Bert be the chair, can then be the vice chair at this point.
Those would be Bert's fine.
And then, so the document, the way that the packet read, it would start at the next meeting. Are we all okay with that changing in January instead of the next meeting as stated in the staff report?
Good point. I think we are. That's what we're.
It works for me. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Very good.
Let's put it this way, whatever works for you would be. That's the reality.
All right. Works for me. For chair and Director Hansberg as vice chair beginning in January 2026. And motion by Director Cox,
Yes.
second by Director Wilkins,
Sure.
as previous. Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Yeah, good job. We'll move through this. And I believe now, Scott, you're up to provide us with update on the.
Nice. Oh, you got it. There's only 6 last. Oh, you're already there.
Morning, board members, President Wilson. So Scott Fleming, interim technical services manager and senior engineer for the agency, here this morning to talk about nutrient removal improvements project. So you guys have known for a little while now this was coming, and we're at that point now, juncture point for decision on how to proceed with the agency. I provided a quite lengthy board memo, I think is prudent for you guys to just be reminded of the background that's led us to this point in time here. So I'll touch briefly on the background and then kind of go into the necessities of this project and how we end up with our recommendation. So yeah, as most of you are aware, we engaged Corolla back in 2019 to perform a master plan for the facility. We had quite a bit of aging infrastructure. Staff was struggling with identifying the appropriate CIP, and out of that master plan, it was recommended to move forward with the rehabilitation of the facility. There was not any alternatives looked at that time by staff and by Corolla to evaluate other alternatives to us utilizing existing treatment techniques and technologies that were established in the 1970s through the 1980s for phosphorus removal for a nutrient, and then later on in the O3 expansion for nitrogen. A lot of those facilities are now coming due at the end of their useful life, both on an equipment basis, but also on a concrete or structural basis. We're having facilities that the concrete's literally falling apart because you guys have seen it there. So with that in mind, we were working on implementing that CIP for those rehabilitation projects, bring those existing structures up to present day standards. As we were evaluating cost and rolling out those CIP programs, COVID hit. As all you are aware, construction costs rapidly increased, and we saw projects coming in 2 to 3 times what we were anticipating for budget purposes for that CIP. Along that process, the thought was thrown out there. Are we really sure we want to double down with moving forward with the existing treatment technologies for long-term plans for this agency, for the community, for the region? And are we positioned well if our nutrient limits change long-term to be able to address the changes by the water board if they get more stringent, or if we get pushed to an alternative treatment process because of what's called an MPDES permit right now? We're permitted with the water board for waste discharge requirements for what we're required to discharge into the Truckee River directly through our disposal field. Those concerns led us to recommending to the board that we pursue a nutrient removal alternatives process evaluation study. We went to Corolla to basically reevaluate the master plan with current today's dollars and establish whether or not there was the necessity to look at other alternatives that weren't previously evaluated as part of the master plan, or an alternative process to our existing treatment technique that long-term would be more cost-effective to implement for the agency relative to a 25-year capital improvements program that doubled down on rehabilitation of treatment techniques. So that study was kicked off in 2024 in March, and we completed it, as you guys are aware, towards the early part of this year. I'm going to jump a slide here. So in that report, Corolla was tasked with comparing the existing alternative zero, which was rehabilitation of the facility, which was the directive out of the master plan, to any other alternatives in a universe of alternatives through a series of workshops and camps. Camps are Corolla's acronym for basically a very detailed workshop that a couple of the board members sat in on, where we looked at all the options on the table. We looked at every treatment technology that this country has to offer and the world has to offer, and looked for our specific discharge requirements now and potential future discharge requirements. How do we best position the facility, the agency, the ratepayers to really accommodate those treatment requirements for the water board? They provided us 2 recommendations out of that. One was to move forward with doing a 5-stage activated sludge process with MBR, and then additionally, a 10% conceptual design that laid out how that would live on the facility from a feasibility standpoint. We did look at trying to, I don't want to use the word shoehorn, but try to use existing footprints in sites and the cost and the level of complication needed to try to stab in new facilities while at the same time running and operating the existing plant and trying to ensure that we can meet our discharge requirements were extremely concerning and very cost prohibitive. So greenfielding the facility versus trying to intertwine it with the existing, just it didn't make sense. So with that in mind, they took it to 10% conceptual design and they left it there and said, okay, here's the recommendation. Or do you like to accept the study and go out looking for a consultant? to move forward with doing final design for the project. And that's where we've been at, is working on trying to identify but going out for proposals from consultants. Staff issued a request for proposals on a qualification-based selections process, which is pretty standard in the industry for us to do that. I reached out and contacted, prior to that RFP going out, 6 firms that I identified that were qualified. These are big names, right, that we trust can design this project, that have relevant past experience in delivering projects of similar size and complexity. Of the 6, we received 2 proposals, and of those 2 proposals, we are coming forward with you with a recommendation based off a universal decision by staff to recommend that Carollo was unequivocally the most responsive proposal to receive. So with that, I included the proposal attached and have the fee in front of you. It's about $18.7 million. And typically in the past, we've done for jobs at smaller scale, about a 10% contingency for construction related. Director Wilkins has previously mentioned that he would like to see consideration for future projects for design services, including contingency by staff to cover unforeseen costs, so we don't have to come back to the board on a regular basis if it's a small tweak or change to the overall design scope. And so with that, I included in here, not quite 10%, just with the fact that it's such a large amount of money to request from the board for this project design, but rather a 3% amount, that equates to about a little over $500,000. I think it's closer to 6 or so. And with the expectation that any major changes to scope or fee that would exceed that amount. So with that in mind, staff are coming to the board recommending that we enter into an agreement with Carollo Engineers to perform a preliminary and final design for new term improvements in the amount of $18,698,881 with staff authorization up to $19,200,000. I'll turn it over for questions.
Can you go back one slide?
Yeah,
please? So a couple things jumped out at me on this. The annual operation, it looks like a delta of about, we're saving $2 million a year. So times 25 years is $50 million. And then the annual maintenance. And I know that when I looked at this, those were the 2 that I kind of focused on. And I guess what I want to say is I applaud the way that everything was put into the way you presented it, because those are the details that I personally really looked at. And I look at this as the biggest infrastructure project in our region that I can remember. It's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest. And 2, the decision we're making today is a generational decision. It's since this plant was built, I've had children and grandchildren, and hopefully not great-grandchildren in the future. But I think it's important to not just look at the numbers for what they are today, but look at what we're providing for those generations that come. And that was something when I made my decision, I weighed extremely heavily. Questions or comments?
Yes, who the other proposal was. And was their fee similar? Do we feel good about Carollo's fee?
So it's an interesting question. So the first part of that, Stantec Engineering was the other firm that was reached out to and ended up proposing on the project. The agency does not have a history of working with that firm in any regard. They did the Donner Summit PUD's membrane project, and they also did the Reno State expansion. So they're a huge firm. They're very large and very capable. Their fee, however, was quite surprising. So the fee came in at approximately, so it was right around just under $5 million, which was substantially underneath what staff estimated for a project of this size and complexity. It would come out based off typical industry standards. We consulted in staff and also just asking industry professionals, what are we missing here with their proposal? Gave them an opportunity to provide that additional level of detail. And honestly, I'm not sure where directly it's missed, other than we consistently saw across the board in all categories that Coral's proposal addressed all of staff's concerns associated with design. And the reason we stand behind this universal recommendation from all of the staff and all the code review panel staff members that are involved in the selection committee is because while Stantec's fee is substantially lower and we're not able to identify the specific elements to a T that drove that, the concerns associated with what is being left on the table are missed. Some of that could be attributed to things like sheet count. There was over 300 sheets lower on Stantec's proposal because we require them to provide a sheet count for all the drawings. And that's one of the indicators of how much a project's going to cost than what Corolla was proposing with. So you translate that to millions of dollars estimated per drawing sheet and how much information that Stantec is trying to convey on the same page of a drawing sheet that Corolla is. And I can tell you right now, from my experience, that translates typically to more open-ended designs that have holes in them that allow contractors to take advantage of designing on the fly in the field and then pushing those costs back on ratepayers and the agency. So my concerns associated with that proposal and staff's were, we don't know explicitly what could be left off the plans and specs, but in order to achieve a price point of that proposal fee, there are going to be things that are performed that would be concerning for us going into construction that would subject us to potential substantial contract modifications from the contractor. So I hope that it's a kind of a convoluted, and we can speculate all day on why the fee was where it was for Stantec, but you know, they could not specifically explain to us how their fee, other than there was a couple new nuances to it, but as a whole, the chief count was a very large driver, as well as the qualifications of the team that they're putting together relative to the team that was received from the proposal, which we already are, that we did work with previously.
So Scott, just to summarize what you just said.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, even though the fee was significantly less, the design part of it seemed to have quite a few holes in it, that we'd pay even more at the construction phase because the design would be flawed.
This is,
Or
yeah.
incomplete, maybe is a better word.
So I'm speculating here, right, Director Clement, and this is, they could very well say we could deliver an equivalent project or product for that fee and give you that sale. It's more of a calculated risk is the agency willing to take to save millions of dollars upfront on the design. The concern is, does that translate over to additional cost in construction? And I can't make any guarantees that would come true, but that is my concern that we see as a staff as we get into design projects with consultants that we haven't previously worked with. And we'd also see likely some substantial, as they get a better scope of work understanding with the project, there would be probably some conflicts associated with negotiating with fee and scope amendments, the full detailed fee out. And the reason I can say with confidence that's a concern of mine is because I'm actually working through that challenge right now. Another design consulting firm actually worked with us. And they are looking to come to the board with a fee amendment request if I'm willing to recommend it, if I think it's reasonable. So we're already seeing that in design with another firm, and I would be concerned that we'd be seeing that with this project as well, much larger scale. Whereas with the Corolla proposal, I feel confident that the fee provided is a fully inclusive fee, that we are going to get a complete product that will minimize the likelihood of chunk orders during construction. Sorry, that's kind of long-winded, but do my best here.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understood what you were trying.
Yeah, to your point, yeah, that is my speculation, but if I had a crystal ball, I wish I did.
And as Scott has already mentioned, we did a gut check. We talked to a half dozen other industry folks. Several of them were industry folks that were considering proposing on this, but chose not to in the end, but had already reached a point where they knew where their ballpark figure was going to be for what they were going to propose. None of them could explain that level of numbers in the design. So that was a little tough for us.
I did like that it's very comprehensive. I like the fact that it takes us all the way through to the bidding process. And so yeah, I was just curious, and that's a big difference.
It's a substantial one, it's one that needs to be addressed, right? We did our best, and we just clarification wasn't quite there on what was in scopes.
So you said staff universally goes Can you tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so when we do a qualifications-based selection committee, the way that we do it here at the agency is we develop and or identify the appropriate staff. In this case, since it's a such large project that's going to impact all departments, we had representatives from ops, maintenance, admin, and technical services representing each of the department managers, and subsequently one representative staff, barring listed and admin, we didn't have to provide an extra staff. So she was the
Oh, the
the
tiebreaker.
swing vote, yeah, per se. And so we had a panel of 7 staff members with one from each department and subsequent ones from ops, maintenance and technical services that's on the selection committee. The way we do it is we do a sealed envelope fee-based qualifications review. So we look at their qualifications, which were listed in here, and go back up to it, or no, it's on there. It's based off of experience, technical approach, and presentation. And each of those has a different weight. So the primary weights associated with this project were the fee, the qualifications, and technical approach. The presentation was worth, I think, 10% or so, if I remember right, is we think 15%. Yeah, I could look up the exact percentages, but staff review those pieces of the proposal and put a scoring weight next to each one. Out of that comes a recommendation from each of those staff members over which proposal was more responsive. We include into that the weighting of the fee structure. In this case, the fee about approximately $5 million versus Corolla's fee of 18.6. We weight the two off of each other for, I think the fee was 30% or 35% in this case for 30, yeah. And that's weighted into the overall decision. When we weighted the fee in Corolla based off of qualifications, it's such a substantially more thorough approach to their proposal and overall understanding of the work that even with the fee factored in on a weighted basis, Stantec's proposal did still not come in this recommend. They were close, but because the fee was such a large weight of it, but they were still off by a factor of points that we felt confident. Everybody knew this is the firm just on qualifications alone without even looking at the fee was more responsive than when we factored fee. Still, he was responsive. Does that give you?
Yeah, I think it's important also to note that those that were scoring did not know what the fee was while the selecting criteria was being evaluated.
The fees open post all the other qualification reviews because otherwise they could potentially have defects. Some agencies don't even factor fee into their selections. Instead, they request the fee post selection, and that's something in the future we can discuss if we prefer to negotiate scope and fee on the back end after we make a qualification-based selection. But the project at this scale, we wanted to get an idea that in a perfect world, the fees would keep it similar, and that's why we, speaking with other consulting firms, knew that a more typical fee structure would be closer to with the role of, and there was a very large concern about why Stantec able to offer such a substantially over.
The other question, Scott.
Yes, sir.
When you analyzed or reviewed the qualifications between Stantec and Carrillo, was it a face-to-face interview with the representatives from Stantec, and or was it a paper exchange?
So it was both, Director
Both.
Fox. Yeah, so we, in the proposal, they have to list out all of their qualified team members that are assigned to the project, as well as their level of effort, work hours, and availability. And then as part of the presentation, they're able to bring in an interview setting during that presentation. They had a 30-minute presentation followed by up to 2 hours of interview questions. And out of that, we were able to directly ask concerns and questions associated with the proposals of the team to identify if the members of that proposal team were knowledgeable and understood the challenges associated with the project. And so again, to add a little more to that, we had a very solid performance by extremely with their presentation team. They flew out all of the key members involved in the project across the board that we've already seen at multiple workshops, and we know have the technical chops to deliver this project for us on time. And that was where the confidence is there that it is a lot of money, but we know this team can deliver the project. That's why I'm seeing it.
Dan? Question, Scott. So I think it's good that we've got the work scope and the cost proposal that takes us all the way through bidding. Did you guys consider rather than a recommendation to award the entire contract, a recommendation to award like up through the 30% design now. Make sure the performance that we're expecting to get materializes, through the design process. That's one reason that can be useful. The other reason is that this project may be well enough known that envisioning what's needed all the way through final design at this point may be more feasible. A lot of times with these large infrastructure projects, as the design materializes, sometimes it gets more complex, sometimes it gets more simple. And oftentimes in that 30% design phase, you collectively as the consultant team and the owner will learn a lot more about what the final project is going to look like and what level of design may be needed for that final project. So I've seen projects like this where rather than awarding the entire contract, a portion of the work scope is awarded. And there's a benchmark for both the owner and the design team to touch off of for what would be a future, contract on the design. But it also provides both of us some opportunity to kind of rescope that 60% and final design effort once we're informed by what comes out of the 30% design effort. So do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. Our standard contracting terms are a services agreement for professional engineering consulting services. We are obligated to pay for the work performed, and we typically pay it out on a time and materials basis to an extent per the agreed upon scope of this. At any point along the way, if we don't have the confidence of the team, our contracts explicitly states the agency has a right just to basically cut the work loose. We'd be obligated to pay them for the work performed date. So if they were in the midpoint of the design deliverable and they had expensed hours for that work, but we had not completed the deliverable, we'd have to pay off for that. But I guess the first point there, we can consider after the PDR if there's an identification that the scope isn't quite hammered out to the level that was in the original proposal. That's where we'd be coming back if it's a substantial increase with an uptake on the scope and be in a reevaluation of that scope with the scope amendment. The second part of that is you did hit on it. This project is pretty well identified because we've already taken it to a 10% conceptual design. If we would have taken it just to that evaluation or study, it would have been more sensible for us to consider just doing a PDR for the next step and then considering putting out an RFP potentially for other firms and Corolla or whichever firm we would have gotten, firms we would have gotten proposals from would wanted to ensure they weren't going to be excluded from our model design by doing that 30% design. But in this case, there are a couple specific facilities where there were concepts put into the proposal that have not been fully detailed out yet. Specifically, I'll give one example. We have our 2 water ponds that you guys, the lovely pond part next to over here, that serves as utility water for the agency around the plant. And there are questions over the strategy long-term, how to utilize that plant process water as it relates to this project. We've identified that we needed to do a 2 water treatments project. However, baked into this scope is the expectation if we're already rerouting the new plant effluent line that goes to the disposal field that we tee off of for the 2 water, we need to identify how we're going to utilize the 2 water pond or fire flows and other things that services. So that's not fully detailed out. Is a good example of what would be something that in the PDR we expect to get more detailed and know the cost at a more concrete level and actually trigger us needing to reevaluate if that's a struggling point for us during that preliminary design to come up with a concrete solution without delaying this project. So there are some things that harmonize, and Richard Plante previously wanted a specific broad item scope in there that any other projects identified during the PDR that need to be included to harmonize this project with our long-term CIP. So I think he was mostly focusing on rehabilitation of existing structures. If we already have a contract and mobilized on site, we know some of our primary clarifiers are 50 years old and need to be rehabilitated. Does it make sense while the contractor's out here to include that in the scope of work? Right now, that is not currently identified as a task in this project to rehabilitate primary clarifiers, but it's a question to ask Corolla during the PDR phase if they can evaluate and provide us a level of effort scope and fee that we come back to the board if it takes over, right? It's a substantial change to the scope.
I think the moral to the story is effectively we didn't see enough constraint by going with an entire package versus a PDR to warrant going through separate efforts. There, but, and there was also some financial forecasting benefits to having a little bit of a solid, this is going to happen and this is the relative period of time it's going to happen in. So that when we discuss the next point on the agenda, we can have better forecasting for, if we were to do a PDR, maybe it was a third of this cost, and then we can assume 2/3 of that cost later, but when. So there was a little bit of cloudiness for the forecasting, so this shored that up a little bit for us. And we've always acknowledged that there's going to be several opportunities for scope modification on this project. Don't know, so.
Yeah, I mean, generally things have to be going pretty poorly to take a project to a 30% design and then switch consultants at that point. It happens, but I wouldn't see that happening here. We've got a very good working relationship with Carollo and have a high degree of confidence in the team they've put together. So that's certainly not a concern of mine. It's really more the potential for, it's like, oh gee, we got another scope amendment, we got another contract amendment on the $18 million contract. It's compared to, that strategy of, do the PDR first, contracting that, have a pretty good idea as to what that next level of design is going to cost, but then fine tune that as part of a future contract so that the likelihood of more incremental ongoing contract amendments, because we've added a clarifier building to the work scope or we've subtracted something. And because the other thing we should look at is, if there's ways to simplify the project, if there's elements that aren't needed, then the design effort that would have gone into those should not be expended. But sometimes having done a lot of public works contracting, it's like, oh, that design work ends up getting sucked up somewhere else on some other design element. It's a lot easier for that to happen when the contract maximum is already set as compared to if it's more incremental over time. So.
Yeah, no, and those are really valid points, right? And in this case, I think, what you see in Carollo's level of detail in the proposal is staff's identification of understanding the facility and knowing this is the specific scope we know needs to be addressed. So there's quite a substantial lift on their part. And I think that's why the fee is so high, is you see, well, not so high, but relative to the project cost, it impacts almost every facility in some regard or the other, apart from what we're handling on the solid side with the digestion improvements currently. And so I think, make no doubt about it, we're still gonna need to have CIP post this project, right? And ongoing work. It's just more of that effect of where do we draw the line and prevent, in a sense, scope creep, right, with the project and ensuring that we're not just tacking things on, going back for scope and amendments as we identify more. And I think when you read through the list of items at the start of the scope work, you can see there's quite a lot there, I think. I'll let you.
I just want to answer your question, Dan. I mean, I think what you're saying is we want to have the ability to be flexible and fluid as the design progresses, and we're totally open to that. We're not like, okay, we've got this contract, we're going to design this thing and we're set in stone. We deal with this all the time. There's going to be changes as things become simplified or maybe they're more complex. So we're totally open to being flexible in that and renegotiating that scope of fee as we see significant changes come about. We're invested in making this project the best for the agency, and we're focused on that one goal specifically. It's not about us getting the most revenue out of this project. It's about getting this project for you guys. So we're totally flexible on all that. Yeah.
And then it just requires diligence on that with the team and the agency reps to be monitoring that. Right? Sometimes you can lose track of what the original contract was.
And that was definitely one of the lenses of your value to push us through.
Yeah.
Because in the event that it goes that direction, how effective is our oversight commission team and qualifications of those and the placement of part of the country and all those things were all part of that equation. So yeah, recognized that it is going to require several years of diligence.
Yeah.
Getting through 30% will be a telling stopping point where we can step back and say, are we still headed the right direction?
Right. Yeah. And I would encourage that to happen. So if we do award the full contract, that would be a good point for both us and the consultant team to take a step back. So, okay, where are we at? Are we still good with this remaining design work scope, or should it be modified in some fashion based on what we're seeing at that point?
Yeah, and with that point, I think I didn't put the proposed schedule in, it's in the proposal, but if you take a look at the schedule, I think something I heard from one of the board members previously is that active involvement by the board of knowing what's going on with this project, not just from a monthly update from staff, but also to being invited and having an opportunity to attend workshops and camps. That is fully baked into the assumptions with this proposal, and part of the reasons we need to have direct involvement. So everybody on the team, not just staff, not just the consultant, but the public, as well as the board, are fully aware of what's going on with this. And so the expectation, the hope is that some of the board members, if not all, and we can facilitate what is required, are interested in attending some of those workshops. So they have a full interest in understanding of where this is going and doesn't get away from it. So the level of oversight from the board, the expectation is it's going to be work for everybody, not just staff, not just the consultant, but also the hope is that there's some level of involvement and engagement as well. And that's part of this is the PDR has a substantial camp in the schedule. The expectation is some, if not all, the board members, however we can facilitate that. And there's implications, I think, the practice, but make that work potentially, so if it needs to be held publicly, so be it, right? So everybody can be in attendance, understand where all these tech memos led to with the overall PDR with the project, make sure we're all on the same page, and we'll have a sharper idea of what the costs are going to be. And if that's the time we start talking about value engineering, we can do that, right? As well as along the way, we're all looking for creative, cost-effective solutions with this project considering it.
Yeah, and then one final comment kind of goes to the cost differential between the two proposals. We've got a small, by comparison, engineering staff here that has a lot of work that you're trying to get done other than this project. The fact that the Corello team has the familiarity with the plant and the organization that they do will, in my opinion, make this, moving this project design forward a lot less labor intensive, particularly on the front end for our internal staff. I think if we were to bring in a new team, could easily be a 12-month period of getting that group familiar with our plan and the people here and our organization that I think would directly impact the schedule of the design. I'm confident that the Corello team, given their background, will be able to move much more rapidly into the design phase of this without the need, for that, I guess, familiarization with the plan and the organization that would be needed with a different team. But I think there's value in that as well.
Yeah, and talking about workload, I know the situation right now as I'm living in it, but the expectation on my end is being able to identify when we get to a point with key milestone deliverables, having the ability to get a secondary opinion. Right? So Jacobs is another firm we've historically used quite a bit, or formerly CH2 and Hill, and they're pretty aware of this facility. And so during major milestone deliverables specifically, and I've already alluded to this with this team, is there's the potential to engage a firm if necessary, and if there's concerns presented about getting that. So hydraulic and nutrient models associated with forecasted loadings with the facility is something that it's a lot of trust to place. And I'm not saying I don't necessarily trust the firm. They have the full capability to do it, but just it's a lot riding on one firm, and that's where at certain intervals we might want to bring someone in as a third party to provide some secondary opinions or support for staff for reviews of major milestone deliverables. I'm not talking about hiring a full second independent third party project manager for us on behalf at this point, but just having them available to provide some of those independent third party reviews at certain junctures where staff identify those would require me, depending on the be in scope, for staff to come back to the board and request those support services when I did. So right now, see how it goes with the confidence level and where we're at with the water board with updates to our WDRs and where that's headed, which is still an ongoing discussion with ops. Once we have a clear picture on that with the updates to the permit, and where our nutrient loads are currently, where they could be, and there's some major changes, which we'll see. That will drive also us with the model and inside of the facility and just getting opinions on sizing, because that's the worst thing is we're in startup and there's something wrong. And I think just having that comfort at night knowing we had someone else take a look and confirm this, everything seemed above board would be a prudent thing for, depending on the BE associated with it, right? So
That's also a heads up that she might be hitting us up with another contract.
I'm gonna be hitting that you up with a lot of contracts over the next couple of months. So to put in, if we need CM services for digestion, so I have an RFP get out that needs to come back for third-party CM services, because that's being, I don't have said they're gonna manage the CM project. And then additionally too, we have some additional identified needs with some projects associated with our SCADA upgrades that we're planning long-term. So the facility is hitting the end of its useful life on a lot of our programmable logic controllers that control this equipment. And with this project, we would like to harmonize the replacements of those PLCs to position the agency to have a cost-effective solution long-term that we can support. And so with that, there's going to be quite a few number of other contracts coming forward that we're going to need to hire. So, and the timing of that is something we're working on, both from a financial perspective with Liz, as well as with updating that capital program to harmonize the whole suite. And that's something we're trying to aim by. Well, promise here in here, right? It's the goal. So,
Yes.
One quick question.
Yes.
You know, you had quite a few firms that were interested. When you talked to them afterwards, what was their reason for not proposing?
Yeah, so I figured I might get this question. So to be perfectly honest, and it's kind of a testament to the work Roll has done, is the amount of upfront effort Roll has done, taken into it 10%, and their history with us over the last couple of years made it too large of an effort for them to overcome. And they didn't think they had that same opportunity, that it wasn't, I don't want to say the term a level playing field, because they had every opportunity to propose on it. It was publicly advertised. The timeframes were reasonable for them to get a proposal to us in. But for a project of this size, for a firm to come in from the outside and put that amount of effort into a proposal, I was hearing figures approximately $50,000 to $100,000 plus, depending on the firm and how much effort they want to put into it. And so every firm has to weigh their workload, their time frame. And so for these other firms that I was hoping to get at least one or two other proposals on, they just didn't feel confident they could compete with this team for receiving proposals. And that's what I think you're seeing, the quality of the members on the team. It's a nationwide effort. You can't just pull resources from one local market for a project of this size. So Roll is bringing in technical experts from folks in Colorado, Florida, a few other places I'm sure Tim could talk about, that provide the staff, the agency, the knowledge, knowing we're getting those lead roles and they're assigned the time for this project. Roll has really put those resources in where the other firms with their assessments didn't think they could compete on putting those resources to use in the time frame. Stop, you know.
Or any questions, comments? I have one comment. The Alpine Board has been working with Corolla on a new development that's been in the works for 20 years. And it's a major financial commitment. And the developer brought in Stantec on the other side to work with Corolla to figure out how to get the cost down. And the surprise was, well, you need to change your standards and your policies and procedures so that you don't have to deliver as high level of service, was the response from Stantec. That's the preliminary response. I don't have to find any final reports or anything else, but that was a little bit shocking. So
Yeah.
to compromise your standards to cut costs and, you know, make something happen for whoever else is paying you, frankly, is not a good sign.
Dan, are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
where we're at?
Yeah.
I got a question, and you might have alluded to it, Scott, and it got by me, but I attended the camp meetings that Carrillo put on, and repeatedly, I heard that our agency has a wastewater discharge requirement that exceeds any level that Carrillo has ever worked with before. And with that being said, Scott, our wastewater discharge requirements are kind of at a level right now that Carrillo is preparing to do a design phase. Are we confident at this agency that our WDR is gonna stay the same through the design phase of this project? Or at some point in time during the design phase of this project, can the state come in and intensify our WDR requirements?
I know Tim's gonna want to respond, to this one, but let me,
But Ricky.
yeah, let me address your comment first.
Because,
You guys-
because what I see
Yeah,
is that as we move forward, we have waste discharge requirements that are the highest in the industry. And that does not mean that they can't go higher. And if they go higher, is Carrillo prepared to meet that demand?
so I'm not gonna speak directly on behalf of them, but let me first talk about our WDRs, and I'll also want to bring Michael into this conversation. So currently, we're on an existing WDR permit that was established after the last plant expansion, right? I think it's
2002.
2002.
See, that's 22 years ago.
And those limits partially were driven by, there was an active, and it was a settlement between ourselves and some other entities that all discharge into the Truckee River. Those discharge limits set by our state water board are set under the assumption we are not a direct discharger to the Truckee River, and our limits are driven explicitly. And Jason's also very informed on this, he talked about it, so I think we can turn it over to a couple of people. To get to the heart of the matter here, we won't know explicitly what the state's planning, but we don't anticipate substantial changes to our WDRs. Is that a relatively?
You're correct.
That's the general intuition we're getting based off some preliminary conversations with the water board. We don't have a draft permit in hand to review, but once we do, we'll confirm that. The second part of your question was more associated with if we did get pushed to stricter limits, let's say we got pushed to an MPDES permit, which is a direct discharge of the river, and they said new limits for us. At that point, is Carrillo positioned to adapt to provide us the technologies and improvements at the facility to meet those lower limits? I believe the answer is yes, and because they already in their initial study evaluated that if your limits get pushed down to a lower level, you're talking about intensification systems like side stream treatment using reverse osmosis that are very cost prohibitive, and you position and design the facility to be able to prepare if we got pushed in that direction, but we're not actively designing to have those in this project because it would be, you look at it as a price per gallon treat. It's kind of the holistic look I like to look at with the wastewater industry. And because of our limits, our price per gallon treated is quite a bit higher than a lot of other rates, but we'll be after this project. Right now, our rates don't reflect that, but we'll be long-term more in line with other markets that have to treat to these levels, right? So I guess, Dale, to your point and your question, this Carrillo team, I'm sure has staff on hand that can design those systems. And Ricky confirmed, for side stream treatment processes to get our limits down to meet future discharge requirements if necessary. And what plays into that, and something I baked into this proposal requirement, is we currently use sodium hypochlorite. We moved away from chlorine gas, and there were always concerns associated with TDS with our permit. The intent is that if long-term we have issues with our disinfection technology we're currently using impacting permit limits in the future, we could implement something like an ultraviolet UV system that can disinfect instead, that doesn't tick us over limits. And so with that, expectation from Carrillo with this team is to design the facility to accommodate a future, and this will be a PDR juncture point at the camp, is we have sodium hypochlorite tanks that are going to be 300 or 400 yards away from the proposed site. So we're going to either dog leg out or bring a pipe over to this new facility to connect those tanks in, or we can look at the cost of doing UV now versus at a later date. And that positions us again as well for being like ready for a permit change with UV already in place, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces here, but I have the utmost confidence. This team is a nationwide team that have seen quite a few of these things. They have to make assumptions that are within cost justifications for us as a community for what we need to meet currently, and then plan for the future, but not necessarily implement at this time because it would be overly cost prohibitive to put in a side stream RO treatment and jack the price of treatment way up if we don't need to. So planning for it, having the space available and the design ready that if we want to implement a future improvement that can bring our limits down, That was the whole driver behind going with the membrane facility. Sorry. Ricky, you want to add? anything?
Yeah, Dale, Director Cox, I just wanted to correct the record on the statement about, Habitat designed facilities that have these low nutrient limits. So we have designed several facilities that have your current low nutrient limits. So the TN, 3 milligrams per liter total nitrogen and total phosphorus of 0.3. Currently, Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility down the hill, Reno has similar limits to this facility, as well as several we've designed in Florida, in Colorado, and other places. I think what you were thinking was the lower limits, the potential lower limits that we talked about. If you had to go to an NPDES permit, then we were talking about a TN of, I think it was a TN of 1.5 and a TP of 0.01. Those are limits that no other facility currently has in the country. And so I think that's where that confusion was. So yeah, there haven't been facilities designed to those low limits, and those would require adding in something like what Scott was talking about, a partial RO to potentially to get there because of the dissolved organic nitrogen that's really hard to remove. And it's something that Tumworks looking at right now currently as well, because of where they are currently with their permit with the NDEP. So anyway, but as far as the current limits, the 3 and the 0.3, we have designed other facilities that meet those, and we're highly confident that we won't have any trouble getting there with our design. Also wanted to say that the selected alternative, one of the reasons we selected this alternative and your staff selected this alternative was because it's the best available technology to meet those limits currently. And so we wanted to best position the agency to not only meet the current limits, but if you did get more strict limits in the future, that you'd be best positioned to meet those as well.
You're confident that you can meet if there is a surge in intensity in our WDR, you're confident that you can meet that goal?
If it gets more stringent,
Yes.
they're with the current alternative, the way it's laid out, we're designing it to meet the 3 and 0.3. If it gets more stringent, there's probably going to be some add-ons. We'll have to evaluate what gets added onto it. But there's ways to do that, and we'll have to look at strategies. So another strategy could be maybe look at, reducing the amount of discharge, to the river or to the, not to the river, but to the disposal field, right? If there's ways to offset with purchasing water rights, so you're not discharging as much. I don't know. It gets complicated, but there's other strategies that could be looked at in addition to the treatment. So
It's an interesting time with the PDR, and it works. Well, I keep saying harmonizing today because that's like the picture I want all of us is we need to come around a long-term solution for this facility in the region, right? Whether it's this direction or, we would have changed directions on it and gone a different route. We have to come up with a plan that we can base financial decisions off of for Liz, but also benefit and ensure long-term treatment solutions for the area. And so with the WDR and the water board, we have been given a general understanding that by the end of the year, we should be getting a draft version of that. Hopefully. With that said, that will give us a better picture of where they are trying to go with our permit. And that's right in line with the timing of this PDR getting worded that we could be in contract with Barolo, them designing. And if for some reason the water board pushed us to revisions to that permit that lowered the standards, the PDR immediately is going to have to shift to address that concern and issue. There might be talks about assumptions made by Barolo, assuming that information best presented shows that our discharge limits aren't going to change based off those conversations with the water board, but we will not know that guaranteed until that process starts.
And just so it's out there and we're aware of it, this is a industry rife with unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
Everybody in the entire country, and especially in California, the Bay Area just got hit. Everybody down there is scrambling because they have nutrient limits. They never had nutrient limits in the past. Now they do. None of those facilities are designed for that. So everybody down there is panicking. They're talking tens and tens of billions of dollars of infrastructure that needs to get put in the Bay Area. No one knew that was going to happen 12 months before it happened. If and when we get any kind of unfunded mandate, reduced limits, whatever it looks like, we're not going to get a ton of notice. The reason we selected this alternative was because this is the one that allows us to design to meet what we need to now, because it would be irresponsible to spend the money to meet something we don't need to. And if the event comes up, oh, all of a sudden our limits are ridiculous, then we have the opportunity to plug and play as easily as possible to get us compliant. Go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish.
There were other alternatives that were capable of doing what we're proposing doing with this alternative that were cheaper, but were much less adaptable to that plug and play alternative.
I'm gonna add one thing. So Director Cox, one thing I wanted to make sure you are comfortable with is this is a municipal plant. We also have a whole other group that deals with industry related to data centers and others that treat ultra pure water for processing and cooling towers. And we're actually designing a facility out in the Reno Tahoe Industrial Center right now that is a zero liquid discharge, ultra pure water facility, RO. And we've done this all over the country for private sector group clients, Intel, TSMC, and others. So we have the capability and staff to treat to those levels. Doesn't get applied to municipal clients very often, if ever.
Because of cost.
Because of cost. So this is the facility we're designing out at the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center is a $187 million facility for 2 MGD. So there's a lot of things at play there that we have dealt with in the past related to those ultra pure limits. So I hope that helps you understand.
That helps me,
Yeah.
because as we go through this discussion, and it's been several months now, the possibility of having this agency be hit with a more strict WDR, and what kind of effect would that have on the direction we're headed right now? It's kind of a moving target, and as I see it, it could be an incredible amount of money added to our plan, and
So just
it
to add,
gives me a vote of confidence that if you say that your team can meet and exceed any kind of increased WDR requirements on our behalf, I'm good with it.
So my question to you, Jason, is the water board meetings are public where we could attend and
Yeah, the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
and you send out the dates for those.
I can identify those, for sure.
I personally think a board member or two showing up with a commentary that says, hey, these are the strictest already, and to go further, you're gonna bankrupt, the community. Needs to be said.
Yeah, again, as Scott mentioned, we don't have a crystal ball, but we've got no indication they plan on going that direction.
This is a insurance policy. We
We've
need
all
to go
got the
advance.
Maui decision and how it could potentially impact us. We just, unfortunately, we don't. I would love to know. I would almost rather knowing that it's going strict, and just get it done than have it hanging over us, but.
and staff did initiate the conversations with the water board to look for revisions to our permit, not just to verify the discharge limits, but there were some other things Ops was looking for. The reason I bring it up is a lot of times, to Jason's point, wastewater treatment facilities get hit with new nutrient limits kind of out of the blue, and they have to scramble to address those. In our case, we're trying to plan long-term CIP around fiscally sound decisions with our budget. And so we wanted to force the conversation to ensure the water board wasn't going to, as we're approaching 90% design with this project, get hit with lower limits after the fact. They still could do it, but the idea is that if we have them revisit our permit now and we can get that in time to know that our limits aren't going to change, then it's an economically and fiscally sound policy to design this specific system. If they change something, then inevitably that is a risk the agency is going to have to take, is that we're marching down after a PDR and design. And then if the water board did that, to Director Clement's point, that's when you start talking about rate to treat, right? And the costs incurred on ratepayers and then the state's willingness to hear those commentary points. But a lot of it's just driven by the EPA and what they want to see out of the water body. So,
But kind of on the WDR limit setting process, that does go through public board hearings. So I think the
Yes,
way
it
that
does.
would typically play out is right now it's at a staff level of dialogue. At some point, there will be communication from their staff to us saying, here's what we're looking at. And then if that's something we feel like we're comfortable with, then there's probably not a whole lot of lobbying needed. Yeah, at that point, we're like, ooh, this could be a big deal, that's where we, think about what's the political strategy to, potentially try to create influence on that. Seems like it's a little premature right now.
I would agree with that. Sentiment that I think we wait, find out what our new discharge requirements are and not draw a lot of public attention to it until it becomes an issue needing to be addressed, right?
They're going to see what they are. I mean, that's the end of the process.
And not see what they are, the preliminary numbers that they're planning.
But that should be proposed. Right.
It's a risk. And staff feel pretty comfortable that this plan has identified enough resources toward mitigating a potential risk that it gives us enough of a safety blanket in the event that it happens, but we're not going to waste a bunch of money going down that road just yet.
I think what I'm hearing is that risk is the risk, no matter what. If it's this plan that we currently have, or it would have been one of the other options. What I'm hearing is the plan we're looking at has perhaps the best, I think you call it plug and play option going forward, that plan would be the easiest one to adapt. Thank you.
That was what was identified in the
Yeah.
report, is this positions us best out of all the existing current treatment options on the market to achieve our current limits and positions us for lower future limits, but we would have to add additional processes to get down.
Because if you were going to RO, you'd have to have a membrane process ahead of that RO anyway. So you'd have to have ultrafiltration or a membrane process ahead of that. So you're already putting in the membrane process, so.
Thank you, Scott. I didn't mean to throw that in there, but it's a moving target and you guys gave me a vote of confidence that we can get this done if we have that anomaly happen.
It's a good point, Director Krause.
Do you have any more comments or questions?
No, let's go and make a motion.
Please.
Indeed.
I'll make a motion to, I'm gonna read it right out there, approve the nutrient removal improvements project engineering design contract.
Second.
Now, not to exceed 18.7 or what was it?
So the language is we would sign a contract with Kroll for that 18,600,000 and it's up there 98,000 approximately. The not to exceed is that amount. Any additional amount they want to charge has to come to us in writing with a request for an amendment for a scope and fee. Staff would be authorized to spend up to 19.3 million without having to come back to the board for authorization of additional funds for this project. So instead of every time we have scope creep in the past, we have to come back to you to ask for $5 and it takes me 20 minutes to explain why we need $5. And in this case, that's gross under exaggeration, but is that there's a reasonable expectation that we need a little bit of contingency in there for things. I lowered it to 3%. On smaller projects, you might see a number like 10%, right? Where if it's a $200,000 job, design fees with engineers can vary with one task, could take up to 10% of the $20,000 scope and be amended. So in this case, we try to throw out the 3% authorization as a reasonable level that the board would trust staff to be within a working range within the project's overall scope before needing to come back for a major scope. For something substantial like designing a side stream RO treatment or building something that was not planned in the original plan.
Okay, Rochelle, could you repeat the motion on the floor, please?
We have a motion by Director Hansberg and a second by Director Clement for the approval of the nutrient removal improvements project engineering design contract. All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to make a comment. Since I've been on this board, this was the best discussion and best questions and comments of anything that in the last 3 years that I participated in. So
It's a big deal.
it was really
It's a
good.
big deal.
Been a lot more discussions.
Well, I'm glad we got rid of all the slackers. That's great.
Stop.
Sorry, couldn't help it.
That's a tough act to follow, and I lost half of my audience, so I'm gonna not take that personal, guys, thanks. They're tired of the sound of my voice.
Sorry, I didn't move it ahead. for you.
That's all right, I'm gonna just take a technology break, here we go.
I'll give mine we're good.
Right? Well, good morning, President Wilson, members of the board. I constantly fail to introduce myself here because I feel like everyone is tired of hearing the sound of my voice. But I'm Liz Cook, your fearless finance leader, and I'm here today to take care of something in my realm is called housekeeping. In your realm is probably a much bigger and more significant moment because I don't believe that we have done a reimbursement resolution before. So I'm going to quickly walk you through what the housekeeping item is, and this is going to kick us off on our debt journey. I have stood at this podium, I have sat in this room around a table at a Carollo camp and held conversations about when it would be time to issue debt, the steps that need to happen until I have the documents or I have the data to build documents that I need to take to the rating agency. We've been working on all of that. So this is our first official step with the reimbursement resolution. What is it? It's a legal document that I'm requesting that you approve and sign today that gives us the ability from 60 days prior. So if you approve it today, I could go back to July 17th. And anytime this fiscal year that I issue debt, I can reimburse our coffers for any money that's been spent. Now, that would be a super cool story if I was going to tell you we spent millions of dollars already this year. We spent less than 100 on the 2 projects that are tied to this. But the approval of the Carollo contract today really sets that wheels in motion. They're going to be working and billing, and we're going to start seeing invoices. So today, I'm asking us to preserve the agency's ability to recover these costs that have been incurred or will be incurred through this fiscal year. This action does not authorize the agency to actually issue debt. It just says, should you now have the ability to do this. Last month, you all approved a governance document that said, I don't have to come here and speak to you every single month about our monthly financials. That was a good move because I'm still going to be here every single month talking about our debt journey. We have lots of things to cover as a board. I am working with Stephen Gortler, who has come here as our financial analyst. I'm actually meeting with him tomorrow afternoon to kick off what our calendar looks like, what agenda items we will have for you all, and when we can have a workshop. I'm looking to spend some dates out there for you all in October so that we can have our debt 101 workshop. You've heard words like SRF loan, with bank line of credit, bond market. Those are all terms that I deal with every single day, and you're only going to hear on occasion. So the debt 101 workshop will do 2 things. It will give you definitions. It will also try to point you to questions you should ask when Stephen and I are standing here, items that you should look for in documents that we put forward for your approval. Sound like a good game plan? All right, that was the short condensed version of the presentation. I saved my words for Scott. He still has another presentation to go. But I would like to turn it over and answer any questions that the board might have about this reimbursement resolution.
Liz, the, use the term that it's good, this fiscal year of funds. So if we had not issued debt by the end of this fiscal year, and then we still have expenditures for the next fiscal year, would we just do another reimbursement resolution for next fiscal year?
It's my understanding that I'll be bringing you this reimbursement resolution every year going forward because we're going to be issuing multiple debt vehicles. Maybe we'll issue multiple issuances of bond debt. Maybe we'll have an SRF loan and some bond debt. And so we want to identify that.
Yeah, thanks.
To add more words to that answer, even though you didn't ask this, I did include 2 projects. This isn't for every capital dollar out. It's only capital dollars associated with digestion improvement and the nutrient potential.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, my question was sort of along that line too, was 20 million. I was like, how do you determine the amount? But I guess if it's just for the fiscal year, that makes sense. I didn't know if we had to put a limit on it.
I put a limit on it for this year because that is the capacity of debt that I believe that we can spend. Stephen and I have been making charts. I brought mountain and bar charts here to say, I think it's here, I think it's here. Oh, we're going to be right here. That spending trend has now started. And so the 20 million also is noted to be maybe 10 to 15-year bonds, not that 30-year look, because it's a little expensive right now. So we'll be bringing back information that will specifically lay out how we intend to borrow that $20 million for approval by the full board in the next 2-3 months.
Questions, comments?
None.
entertain,
I move to approve resolution 2025.
it's second by Director Wilkins. Rochelle, should this be a roll call?
Normally it's just ordinances, but we can go ahead and do that. Just
Let's do a roll call, please.
Director Clement,
In favor?
Director Cox.
Yes.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
Director Hansford. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Morning again, board members. Here in front of you today to represent the Rotary Club. They're looking to add additional benches onto our property down along the Town of Truckee's Legacy Trail. They're proposing installing another 4 benches in addition to the existing 4 they have on our property to make a total of 8. There was a map included that I made for you guys. Hopefully it's somewhat visible. I'll just point and gesture. It's easier for me at this point. So 2 of them are on TSB property of the 10 shown on this map, so they're not relevant to us. And then of the colors shown on here, the pink are the existing benches they've already put in, and the orange dots are the proposed locations of it. I did confirm all 4 benches being proposed are on our property. One of them straddles the line with the Caltrans right away, but it's just inside that. With that, and turn it over to you.
I move to approve the full.
Second.
Third. Motion Hansford, second by Director Lopez. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
While we got this discussion going on, this is gonna seem a little trivial, but I think it does have some merit. I have some neighbors in Squaw Valley that use the Wilkins Legacy Trail regularly. They've asked me, and I don't know who we should talk to, whether it be the Rotary Club or the Town of Truckee. That is, there's no place for a female to relieve themselves along the trail. Would it be possible to sit back and have some kind of a porta potty somewhere along that trail, Dan?
Probably not the Rotary Club. It's
That's why I'm looking at you.
not happening.
It's your trail, and you should help us out, maybe facilitate getting a porta potty somewhere along that trail, midway, beginning, end, or whatever. Because I'm being nagged about this trail, and it doesn't have anything to do with TTSA, but it does go across our property.
Sure. Immediately, you could let them know that there's restrooms up at the Riverview Sports Park. Which the trail ties into,
That's true.
so.
Okay, I'll direct the comment to you, Dan,
Yeah.
the next time it happens.
That's fine.
You better hope that you're, retired.
Second to me, tell them to call me in January.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thanks. I had to get that in there.
Well done.
So next item on the agenda is a brief discussion of the remainder of the calendar year into the beginning of the next. For board meetings, we've got a lot of holidays coming up. There's some, decisions, some years to skip meetings to, accommodate holidays schedules. I would just tell you the one thing, it's been communicated to me hard and fast, is that we must have the December board meeting. Whether it happens on the 17th or whether it becomes a special board meeting is irrelevant, but we need to have a board meeting in December, given timing for finances. Other than that, this is the schedule as it stands and will happen unless. There we go. Thank you. So if there is an opportunity for discussion, or if anyone knows immediately off the top of their head, they will not be available, we can have that discussion and make modifications.
Yeah, I'll just throw out, and I'm not asking some modifications unless it's helpful to other board members as well, but I'm not going to be available for the October board meeting. And then the November board meeting, I will be out of town, but I can participate remotely.
That's helpful for the government.
And I will not be available for either of the January meetings. Bert, any,
No, we're looking good. I don't plan that far in advance. Like some of you.
yep,
I'll get with Rochelle, but, it appears that, I'll miss the, November meeting, but I will be remote. I'll be here for, December. Planning ahead past December. I'll let you know, Rochelle.
Yeah, actually, the February 18th board meeting, I'm going to be unavailable for that one. So.
Yeah, and again, if it's a matter of someone won't be here and that's okay, that's kind of, at the board's discretion, obviously, it's a quorum. But if we're rearranging dates, this would be the opportune time. But if it's just you're gonna be remote or you're not gonna be available, then I think we can manage that.
As long as we can have that within the district boundary.
Catherine?
I know at this time, I don't have any conflicts in anything.
All right, easy conversation.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
Not
I
necessarily.
think we're good.
good.
Department reports.
Morning, Board of Directors, President Wilson. Michael Peak, Operations Department Manager. So for the Operations Department report for the month, all plant waste discharge requirements were met. Plant performed well. After a competitive in-house selection process, 2 operators were promoted to senior operator positions. And we had 0 completed work orders or pending. This was the flows and the limits for the month for effluent and the cost of chemical. Company. You can see we're pretty tough. Any questions for the operations?
Thank you.
All right, good morning, Board. All right, so for the month of August, we did provide support for a digestion improvements project, nutrient removal project, which we've discussed at length today. So the redundant server project, which was approved by the board previously in a few months back, SCADA upgrade project, which is a new project you'll be seeing shortly. Scott alluded to that earlier, and the TRI lighting project. For the month, notable tasks for the month: replaced a bar screen, sluice water solenoid, made some modifications to that to a new style. Ongoing replacement of some chem sludge valves. You'll see some pictures of that later. And what a chem sludge valve looks like. They're pretty in depth to get those things in there. We bought a lot of them. It's a big project. Poured new base for the digester number 30 recirculation pump and installed pump. Replaced dewatering centrifuge motor mount assemblies. Also a bigger job than it sounds like on paper. So it's pictures of that. Ongoing defensible space abatement. That is an ongoing project, and we're developing long-term plans and goals in collaboration with Truckee Fire. On-site viewer training for bar screen and wash press. We had a rep come out and some training for us. It was good to help us get through some issues we had with wash presses. We relocated and configured the smart cover for the TRI lighting project. And we installed new conductors to the flock mixers and replaced the motors. You're going to see some pictures along those lines. They're old, they're aging. That's part of our aging infrastructure that we need to keep up and running. because that's stuff that's gonna go away in the future. So we're trying to do everything we can to keep them going. Save money where we can. We replaced the exhaust fan in the pipe gallery and some scrapers on secondary number 4. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong slide there. I apologize, I was following along there. All right, we still have 3 unfilled positions. The SCADA specialist one is out right now. We have an open recruit for that. The other 2 are still being revised as work orders for the month stayed pretty flat month over month with a slight uptick in a couple of areas, but we're still maintaining within a certain margin of error there. All right. So as you can see, that's what a flock mixer looks like. There's a big blade underneath that goes into the basin. You can see that's pretty old. We spent a fair amount of time on those, but we do have to keep them up and running because they are critical for our operations. And that's just some pictures of some of our staff performing work on the conductors, pulling the underground wires through and getting those up and running. There's Digester 30 recirculation pump and the base. And to the right there, I was talking about the motor mount assemblies. That's a large motor that sits in that cavity for the blue motor bases there. So it was a big job for both of our dewatering centrifuges. So we found cracks in those and they had to be replaced. And that's a picture of some of our end sludge valves, a couple of our staff working on that. We still have about that many more to do still on the other side. So there's this is an ongoing project when we can coordinate with operations for downtime. And that's just one of the solenoid valves I talked about earlier. To the right there is the secondary 4 scrapers. You see those scraper bars down at the bottom. This requires us to do an entry into that space, with ladders and things like that. We have to have monitors and whatnot. So we got that job done pretty quickly and released it tops. Any questions I can answer?
The 3 unfilled positions.
Yes.
Do we anticipate any of them being filled by the end of the year?
Well, we're hoping that the SCADA specialist is going to be filled as soon as possible. The E&I technician position, that's the one that's under assessment right now. We have it in the budget currently because if we needed, there was a position there. We have not filled it yet because we're trying to see the impact of the workload. Because it may present an opportunity to not fill it and eliminate the position. Okay. So we're trying to be as efficient as we can, but we need the data to say whether we do or don't need the position.
Thank you.
Regarding CMMS GIS technician, that's a position that we're looking at closely to hopefully redefine it, to get better value at it for that position. And that would require a rewrite of the job description as well. So we're looking closely at it and we'll have more at a later date.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Morning again, Board of Directors, Scott Williams, Technical Services Manager, to provide you a Technical Services Department report. So starting off, digestion improvements. Currently, we're working with Brown and Caldwell. They're progressing towards that 60% design deliverable. Hoping to have some renderings to show you guys on what we're actually planning on putting out there after that was received. And then, as I mentioned previously, we're going to be working to get an RFP issued here for construction management services. We've got currently, I believe, 5 consultants that all intend to put a proposal together for it. And so with that in mind, we'll have a selection committee and hopefully in the next month or 2 be coming back to you with a recommendation to award that CM services agreement to one of those firms. And then we're working on critical path equipment items specifically needed to be pre-purchased, pre-negotiated, pre-selected with legal and with those vendors. This is specifically the linear generator that we've talked about that the board would need to authorize the purchase agreement with that proprietary technology to reduce our risk of getting price gouged during construction, and then also a waste gas burner that we're looking to sole source as well. So there'll be a justification for those sole sourcing of those 2 pieces of equipment. I did include a schedule just as a visual representation for those that prefer these. So this is just a high level overview of where that project is at right now. So you can see we kicked it off in May of 2024. We started with the basis of design verification and then entered into final design this past spring. So we're progressing on track as anticipated to date and approaching that 60% design deliverable, which is anticipated towards the end of October, followed by an agency review period. Total amount invoiced to date is approaching $1 million as of their August invoice. So it's also in line with the task item amounts associated with each of those specific separate subtasks for those design deliverables. So nothing to report yet, but I do anticipate a potential fee and scope amendment for some additional scope items that were not anticipated with that project. Specifically, we're designing a new access road behind the board here along the fence line that's going to come up to that new board. So it's 60%. I will present those additional items that triggered that scope and fee. So we're looking forward. Moving over to Truckee River Interceptor Rehabilitation Project. This is Manhole 33 to 35, Alpine Meadows to Olympic Valley. So this is the first official week of the project kicking off. I included 2 slides ahead where we're at with that schedule. It's probably pretty difficult to read. I tried to make it as big as I could while conveying the information. So as you can see, we're on the week of 9/14. The contractor submitted a much more detailed version of this, and he, for whatever reason, decided to build the schedule around Sunday and started working for them. So with this in mind, our schedule for those interested represents when we anticipate the Truckee River Trail closures to complete that work for the lining project. So what I can, a high level, tell you with the schedule is the contractor made a very solid effort to minimize the full closures or hard closures of the Truckee River Trail with Tahoe City PUD. We've been coordinating with them. So the big challenge is wall construction work activities are occurring during typical work days, Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. shown in orange or yellow. There's going to need to be intermittent closures and no trail access due to moving heavy equipment to reduce liability for ourselves as well as for Tahoe City PUD. And with that in mind, this week, really, the trail is still open up until Friday at the point we're anticipating. They're currently clearing out the sites for where they need to stage equipment around manholes, and then they're also bringing in high-density polyethylene pipe, HDPE pipe, that's going to be used for the bypass. So they're offloading it adjacent to 89 near Olympic Valley. You might see that depending if you're driving in that corridor. And then they're moving it through a temporary construction easement to be secured over a bridge and then fusing it and dragging it onto the trail, starting more or less this weekend. So that's where that project is at as far as the scheduling goes. And I guess I can open it up intermittently for questions if you guys want to jump in. Or we can
Yeah, what was the total cost of that lining?
It's approximately $1.2 million. The original estimated amount was like about $2.5 million, I think we budgeted for.
So we were 50% of the 50% of the.
Yeah, it was a happy surprise, right, for the bids we received relative to what we were anticipating the cost with the logistics of the project. So,
1.2.
yes, sir. As you guys are aware, you just awarded the nutrient removal improvements project to Carollo. Scope and fee negotiations were completed prior to coming to the board. So on the back end of that, we'll now get into contract with them, have them sign the services agreement to be signed with the general manager and move into scheduling kickoff meeting for the project in early October with the proposed schedule. And then 2025 digital scanning of sewer lines, he's about 90% done with the inspection work for that. They're anticipating wrapping up this week with all of the CCTV, we call it digital scanning, effectively similar to closed circuit television inspections, and then we're going to be awaiting deliverables. So the sequencing is do the inspection work, they compile all those videos, and then they put them into a formatting that they can hand over to us. So 50% of that payment will be forthcoming to be authorized by staff upon completion of the field work, and the other upon receipt of a complete deliverable from the contractor with ProPipe. Lab activities, quarterly pre-treatment sampling and annual sampling is occurring. Proficiency testing began this month and will continue throughout the rest of the year. And then continuing California Department of Public Health COVID sampling, optional tasks that they basically provide us the materials, and it's no real additional cost to us. And then corrective actions for the lab this month, 2 with 3 pending. On the IT side of things, there were 29 completed corrective work requests with 5 outstanding. There's for preventative maintenance 4 completed and 2 outstanding. And then there's ongoing work with the firewall. The permit portal is ongoing with us as well for that. We have some installed and tested remote software support for staff. So that way IT department can remote in to laptops and desktops to support staff if they're not available to do it in person. Website migration project and new laptop commissioning and rollouts. We have about, I think, 11 purchased this year for staff for outgoing, old outdated laptops. Coordination meetings with the operations technology team, password vault integration for operations technology team, and then we piloted the new IT ticketing system, which has gotten pretty good reviews from staff to simplify how we go about processing work requests for IT related issues for admin and other staff relative to using our asset management software that we historically use. So that's it from technical services. Any specific questions?
We're good. Thank you.
Good morning again. It's still morning. We're making great progress on this meeting. Love it. So I'm here to talk about the administrative report for August. For risk and safety, we actually attended a mutual aid training down at TSD. There was some spill response training as a piece of it. It was really awesome for me to make contacts with, for our team to see what happens when one of our member agencies has to respond to something. I learned that I can make shapes and measure. That was also, I learned my role and responsibility during a spill is not to be out on the ground looking at things, but to be back at home providing numbers, contact information. That was a great regional training. We also still have our recruitment for the safety and compliance administrator going on. On the finance side of the house, we held our August finance committee meeting on August 12th, and we took care of making our AP payments, our payroll payments, all of those items. From billing and customer service, again, no pictures. We're still working on our outdoor pictures, but she did go out and do 2 commercial account inspections along with the general duties. Same for purchasing administration, running that front desk and making sure that we're purchasing everything that we need. On the general administration side, I went to the CSDA conference in Monterey. I really did want to sneak a picture of my garlic bread bowl clam chowder in there. I just chose to talk about it instead. It was amazing. I also attended a few really great sessions. I went to anything that was talking about issuing debt or financing large projects. There was someone there from South Tahoe who we just financed a project, so I got to have contact with her and learned about their journey. I also went to a session on Monday to learn how to present policies to the board so that the board will approve the policies. So I hope to get a little sharper for you all on that as well. And as always, we performed various administrative duties at the pleasure of the GM or directed by the law. Last but not least, here is a breakdown of our connection fees for August. A conversation came up in finance committee about the actual EDUs per year. So I'll be adding some historical information to this and giving us maybe the last 3 or 4 historical years for connections. So we can keep an eye on that as we talk about projections and looking at our. I think that does it for my report. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Liz.
All right, short and sweet.
So yeah, lots on the packet. Obviously, most of it covered by other departments in some capacity. I do want to just give a special shout out to TSD for NCWA for hosting that event. We have, a substantial pipeline, and it's a risk in our community. So having the local agencies communicate and work together to identify what that response would look like if it ever, hit the fan, boy, that is a reassuring thing. So lots of future resources going to be committed to improving those relationships and getting more regionalized concept put together. So just shout out that. We've been having various discussions about the land surplus and not a lot to report on that. We had some interviews, as was mentioned in the operations report. We had a couple of promotions, which was great. Love to see those things. We had the first all hands meeting that I was able to present. It was a good time. We all kind of got together and established a little bit of the temperature and what expectations are. And I think it was well received. People had a good time. It was reassuring. The Truck and Music Fest happened. Good news about that is we didn't even notice it. So they've got that thing nailed down and it doesn't really impact us. So it's a good story there. We've been having more and more people attending conferences wherever we possibly can. We're getting more involved in CSDA, CSRMA, CASA, all of the kind of administrative things that maybe in the past we didn't have as thorough coverage on. We also have several individuals, including myself, going to WebTech in Colorado, which is the big industry conference for the year. So that should be amazing. We've got a lot of, we're lined up pretty detailed with Corolla already, scheduled to go talk to very specific vendors, look at very specific operations, talk to other people that have gone through similar upgrades. So that should be very, very busy. Again, we're utilizing the CSDA training. We're gonna have, Raquel's gonna attend some board secretary training and a conference. So those are always good. And again, continuing on with the outreach, that's gonna be, that's something that's been brought up specifically by a couple of the board members. Outreach is on our docket. We are moving into it. Now we've got a story to go tell. So the story is going to go get told. So any opportunities that you can facilitate in your boards or at your local agencies or even within the communities of that area, we would love opportunities to go and speak and get people kind of rallied around the cause. Any questions?
We're good. Final board comments or questions?
I need to give a finance committee readout, I believe. So at finance committee, the main things that we talked about were the connection charge policy. There's some interesting state regulations around it, but something that we should look at. Definitely when we go to our next rate increase. Also on the agenda for October for the board, you guys should be aware that we're going to put a policy in front of the board on reserves and how we handle reserves. It's really housekeeping in advance of going to raise any debt. We've got some funky ways of how we fund certain things that need to be fixed because right now it doesn't make any sense. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. We also reviewed all the capital projects, including the membrane plant stuff. If we have to go down the ozone path, we'll have to raise another 200 million, but we're not going down that path right now. But we went through all the capital projects to make sure that we were on target with that as well. And then the reimbursement resolution, we talked about that. You guys approved it today. So that's really the readout from the finance committee. We feel that we should give you that every month when we don't present full-blown quarterly financials and everything else. And that's the way we're going. Any questions?
Thank you, Bert.
You're welcome.
See.
I have just one thing. I couldn't understand why we don't have alternatives as a board. Most agencies like this that I've worked with have alternatives, alternates, not alternatives.
Being a new alternative.
And I assume it has something to do with the fact that we are written as a special act for this district agency, excuse me, gosh. And I just didn't find the time, honestly, to really research it. So it's not something, I'm just curious, maybe we could delve into that a little bit. It's not a necessary thing, but it struck me as odd, A, and B, I thought, it does provide an opportunity for someone else to come and kind of learn about it and, perhaps become a replacement for someone in time. So I wouldn't mind if we could maybe just do a little bit of research on it. Again, no rush, just.
So you're talking about like I'm not gonna be here for the October board meetings, like the city PUD appointing an alternate.
Correct.
Yeah.
But each
question.
Yeah.
So each organization would have to appoint an alternate.
If it's,
It's even possible, I don't know, because it's a special act.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Very different. Anyway, it just struck me as I came onto the board, I don't have an alternate. I was really surprised that I didn't have an alternate.
I'm not sure I could find an alternative in my case.
Yeah.
That's definitely something I can research. Now, if the board's interested, I can make it a topic, an item for the board to discuss maybe next month or the month after I've talked to legal and done some research on that.
It would probably be an informational item first.
Yeah.
From legal would be what I would think.
Okay.
So
Yeah, no rush, just.
Speaking of legal,
Yes.
can you tell us, does,
Yeah, so we, Josh was not available this meeting, and he had asked me if there was a desire to have an alternate show up for this meeting. And so we had a pretty good discussion about his position, Josh's position on the necessity of having legal present for every single meeting. And we came to the determination that, when we have a agenda finalized, we'll take a look at it, we'll ask them to take a look at it, and if either of the parties feel that there's a legal nexus or a benefit to having legal there attend that meeting, that we can make that call, the week prior. That's how we're operating under this meeting. We did not elect to have his assistant show up. If that's not the direction the board wants to go, then we can change, but otherwise, that's how I plan to proceed with having legal present in the future.
And we saved $1,000.
It's a dollar figure. I don't know exactly, but yes,
Do we have an update?
Case.
exactly.
Do we have an update on the employment pattern that got kicked around a couple months ago?
No. November,
November, okay,
mid-November, I'll have an update in closed session.
thank you.
I'm comfortable with that on the legal, I'm very comfortable with that, that's
Same here.
appropriate.
Well, that, I will let Josh know that that is how we will proceed with.
I move to adjourn.
You're on fire.
all in favor? Aye.
All right.
All right. Good job, Scott.
Thanks.